Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with the not-so-daily dose of doom and gloom. Guys, this is going to be a challenging video for me to get through without going on 50,000 tangents, because as you can see by the map, we're going to be all over it, and I forewarn you, if you came here for good news, prepare to be mildly traumatized as I try to weave all the day's bad news into a fine tapestry of speculation for you to take to the bank. Don't do that. But hear me out, because I'm going to try to make sense of what's going on in the world in the way I typically do by looking at all of these things as they interrelate and not looking at any one of these stories in isolation. That's really what we have to do to really figure out what is going on throughout this period. Some people call it the Great Reset. Some people call it the Great Simplification, the collapse of Western civilization as we know it. It's the age of consequences. It's when an existing empire, an existing paradigm is coming into conflict with a rising paradigm, or blocks of nations who are tired of being under our boot heel, and now they're starting to rebel. And this was inevitable. It's going to happen. It's only going to get worse, but we can still joke around. And we can still, self-deprecate in a national sense, in a human sense, in a species sense. People want me to talk about this Tucker Carlson, Don Lemon thing. I don't really want to, but I have to. So I'm going to share my opinions on that, and then we're going to jump into, the things that matter. Not that that doesn't matter, because it does to a degree. We still have to talk about it. So, of course, Don Lemon, and many of you know, and Tucker Carlson fired within 1 hour of each other, which is very coincidental, we can say, to be nice about it, that guys on opposite ends of the political spectrum working for news agencies who are on opposite ends of the spectrum, although they share many similar shareholders. So their differences are only skin deep. And like a lot of these grifters, they're kind of there to entertain. Tucker Carlson was also a very, very pro-establishment back in 2006, 2007. I don't think it's so much that he's changed his opinion on a lot of things, because I think either you're a bona fide person of integrity or you're not. I think it's just that a lot of these places seen that the market was shifting, and you have to appeal to that market somehow. So you need to start to shift in your perspectives, and Tucker became the guy who was anti-establishment on Fox News, okay? Whether he's legit and he authentically believes those things, I don't know. Whatever the case is, they got rid of him. Everybody has their theories as to why. Was it because they don't want Trump to get elected again? I don't think so, because again, I think those differences are skin deep when we're talking about bipartisan politics. At its core, the system remains unchanged, just like it did throughout Trump's 4 years in office. Not much really changed on a fundamental level. There was some changes. He tried to rock the boat a little bit, but you can only do so much when you have a 4-year term, especially when you're trying to be reelected. And if you do have some deep state establishment working against you, I mean, it's no surprise that in 2020, his last year in office, you had the most wildest money printing that you had ever seen before. You had, the initiation of Operation Warp Speed, which would go on for some to be the leading indicator of some of the most draconian policies that many countries would attempt to put on their population that, of course, now they're making apologies for. So no, I'm not sold on the fact that they took Carlson out because they were worried that he was going to get Trump elected. Maybe there's some issues with legal stuff, and Murdoch worried that, there's going to be more legal cases filed against the team. Maybe they're just dumb, and it's the old guard who has not adapted to the new guard, and I'm talking about social media, and it's just dying. Fox News, CNN, all these mainstream news networks are dying, and they're on the brink of dying. Things do die. Things have cycles. Eventually, they will come to an end, but they'll likely just morph into some other form. And at the end of the day, it's just money that their shareholders are going to move into some other venture that will start off seemingly grassroots, and it will ultimately become the establishment, okay? So what you commonly see with a lot of these people who leave these agencies and are either let go or resign, or they maybe are terminated, like in the case of Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson, apparently, is they will go into the independent media, and they'll be wildly successful. And I have a prediction for Don Lemon. I think that Don Lemon, he is going to become the biggest right-wing grifter you've ever seen in your life. He's going to do a complete 180 politically. Just watch. Just watch. I guarantee you. Canadian Prepper is predicting that Don Lemon, if we don't blow ourselves up in the next few months or years or whatever, is going to become the voice of the right. I think that the resentment that he is going to carry for CNN and this establishment grift that he's been banking on for so long, and now realizing, what exactly the monster that he helped create, I think you're going to see him go in the complete opposite direction. Okay, and people are going to buy it. They're going to buy into it. And Tucker is kind of the same way. Most people don't realize because they're still new to the game. But when Tucker was coming up in the early 2000s, he was very pro-war, very pro-establishment. If you were an independent media voice, he'd shoot you down in a hot second. He's changed because we've changed. And in the age of consequences, what typically happens is people get mad, and it's very easy to serve up rage bait. We don't do rage bait on this channel. We're not pointing the finger at and saying get mad at those people. And this is why the next 18 months, the political channels on YouTube are going to have a real hot run, because it is rage bait season like never before. Okay, what was I talking about? So yeah, I mean, they're catering to us, because in the age of consequences, when things are collapsing and there's austerity, people are going to seek out authentic voices. They would rather listen to a guy like me rant about stuff, even though I'm not in a suit, I'm not in a nice fancy studio, I don't have a teleprompter. And the reason why is simple, because during these periods of time when a civilization is at its penultimate state, right before it's about to collapse, it's also at its phoniest. And people, they're living this life, which is bullshit, because they can't afford anything, yet they're told, that life is supposed to be so much better, even though they're living literally paycheck to eat nutrient deficient foods and just barely get by in this lonely, alienated Western existence where, it's just matchboxes and, you don't form deep, meaningful relationships with people anymore. And people are really upset about this. And they need somebody to speak to authentically. That's why people gravitate towards influencers like me, because we're not full of shit, even though we don't have the script, even though we don't patronize you and are skilled in oratory in order to use the right cadence and talk to you like news anchors are trained to do. You would rather listen to someone like me, even if I don't always hit on all the right details and even if I make some minor errors, because I'm not full of shit, okay? But what I worry about with this whole situation is that in Canada, Canadian government might look at this and become very emboldened and very brazen in their censorship. We already know Bill C-11 is coming down the pipe. Even YouTube is protesting against that one. They are encouraging creators like myself to speak out against it. In fact, we are going to have some politicians on in the not so distant future, and not for political reasons, but just to talk about how crazy this bill is that is going to really allow the government to regulate social media, because the old guard is dying. It's dead. And I don't know if Rupert Murdoch just lost his mind, if they're throwing in the towel, if the juice ain't just worth the squeeze, but Tucker Carlson is going to be wildly rich. And even Don Lemon, I guarantee you, if that guy goes right-wing grift, he's going to make a killing. People are going to buy into it. He's got to do it slowly, but people are so fickle nowadays and capricious that they will fall for anything. It doesn't matter. You're as good as your last fight. You're as good as your last video nowadays. People have no long-term memory for anything. Anyways, I told you it was going to be a meandering rant today, and that's what it's become. But understand, guys, that I will always try to be authentic. Some people are, I don't even know if they're necessarily bad people, but they've been conditioned to lie so much that it's just second nature. And I'm talking about a lot of these pundits. So that's why I'm not really sold on the idea that, Tucker was released because he was speaking out against the war, or he's trying to get Trump reelected. Maybe that's the case, maybe it isn't. It's all speculation, but it is a sign of the times that, the old guard is getting nervous, okay? Because there is the war is about to take a very wild turn for the worse. Make no mistake about that. And we're going to talk about all the details of that today. I have a big list of stuff to go through here. Before I do that, I want to let you guys know we got some EDC gear in. There's one pair of pants that I wear every single day that I've worn every day for 5 years. Okay, I know that sounds crazy. I got enough to think about than to have to worry about what I'm going to wear today. One pant to rule them all. And in my personal opinion, I've always been a proponent of LA police gear pants. I'm wearing them right now, and I've perfected the EDC trinkets that go inside it. So myself personally, the two things that I carry on my person all the time are, well, I carry more than this, but these are the things that we actually have at CanadianPreparedness.com. Because now that I've been able to get a bit of influence, I've been able to bring these things to you guys, and I only promote stuff that I actually use. Benchmade bug-out knives, lightweight but durable. Exceptional quality knife. I love Benchmade knives. People have political gripes with them, whatever. They make a great knife. The reason why you want a light EDC knife is because if you get a knife that is too bulky, too heavy, one day you're not going to carry it. That's going to be the day that you need it. The Benchmade bug out and the Streamlight, what is this called again? The Wedge. These two things go together with this Atlas pant. I'm going to post links in the description, guys. Like butter, man. It is a match made in heaven. It took me years to find the ultimate EDC. Nothing would make me happier than for me to run into somebody in the street who is wearing the pants, who has the wedge and has the bug out. I'll consider that my work is done here and I can just retire. But go and check these out, guys. I can't go over all the features, or else this video would be like 3 hours long. But they're just the perfect pant. They're lightweight, but they're durable. They're not overly tactical looking, but they definitely are a tactical pant. You have zip-up pockets for the things you don't want to lose. You have just pockets everywhere and nice and flat. Nothing bulky, none of that, bulky, flared out cargo pant nonsense. Just perfect, man. Absolutely perfect. Benchmade knives and LA police gear, STS, Atlas pants, and Wedge flashlights go together like white on rice, baby. And yeah, I think we got about 1,000 of those in stock. I made sure I put away some 36 by 32. I've probably went through about, must be at least, oh man, I've been wearing them for 5 years. I must have went through like at least a dozen of those pants, and I just cycle them out. I don't wear the same pair every single day. Well, okay, some days I do, but you got to do what you got to do. All right, so yeah, I'm actually going to do a 24-hour sale, 15% off all those 3 items from CanadianPreparedness.com. 15% off a Benchmade knife, a Streamlight wedge, and an LA police gear. We're trying to keep our employees working here throughout this recession. It's not easy to keep them having livable wages at this day and age, but we're going to ride it to the bitter end, okay? So, what do we got going on here? Oh, geez, look at that. Pressing all kinds of buttons. Nate Mack. Fortunately, that is not my real name, so I'm not too concerned about confidentiality. All right, so Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons, according to Dmitry Medvedev. Well, what the hell else is new? He's saying that all the time, right? Well, today he gave a speech which was abnormally long, even for him, which I think he's delivering this to the Air Force in Russia or their space aviation group, something like that. And he's talking all about how he thinks that it's very likely that we're going to see a world war and that the use of nuclear weapons will be preemptive, that they will in fact do a first strike. Now understand the relationship in Russia with Medvedev and Putin. In my opinion, this guy here, he's kind of like the bad cop. Putin's the good cop, believe it or not. A lot of people think Putin's the bad cop. But Medvedev has said that if he was in charge, he would, without hesitation, use nuclear weapons. So, understand that if Putin ever was taken out of office, who would replace him? You know, who is still being groomed as a potential replacement? There's people in the Kremlin who are far more hawkish and who have much less patience with NATO. So I think, you know, he's kind of kept there as a threat to try to force the West to negotiate. But it appears as though they don't want to negotiate at all. In fact, Ukraine is calling their bluff. The Ukrainian, I think he's the defense minister. The guy looks like he ain't older than 40 years old. Okay, he hasn't had too much life. I'm sure he's had a lot of experience in battle and the front line, obviously. But he's saying that he's calling Russia's bluff. He thinks that even if we take back Crimea, they're not going to use nuclear weapons. They don't have the balls to use nuclear weapons. Really? You think that they're going to let go one of the single biggest strategic peninsulas that is under their control in that neck of the world that connects them with the Middle East, that connects them with Europe? You think they're just going to allow you to take that over? They're not going to do it. I mean, this is just in the land of delusion and fairy tales, which is, you know, quite consistent from what we've seen from that side of the argument. But what we have here is a collision course. And unless Washington steps in and says, okay, we got to put the brakes on this, we got to force Zelensky to negotiate, it doesn't look like they're going to do that, because what Mark Milley is saying now, he came out today and said, if we lose this war, this is exactly what he said. He said, if we lose this war, then we're going to have to increase our defensive spending. We're going to have to double it. Double it. It's already $1 trillion. They're going to have to double it to $2 trillion if they lose this war, because apparently they're going to have more, you know, they're going to have to police more of the planet. They're going to have more defenses to set up as a result of this. Anyways, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We're 17 minutes and we're only past the first story. Moscow is asking YouTube and other media agencies to scrub a presentation that was given in 2021 that apparently disavowed some of their bunker secrets in and around Moscow. If you didn't know, there is just a lot of the bunkers that have been built in Moscow. There's whole cities that exist underground. It's probably one of the most tunneled regions on the planet, built to withstand a nuclear war. And this is actually a pretty good video. I'm not going to show all of it, but it's called Russian Secret City, Homeland of Soviet Nukes. He takes you on a tour of all these places around Russia, these deep tunnels, and I'll post a link to that in the description as well. Let's just kill that there. Okay, so we got attacks on Moscow, thwarted again. Okay, more Ukrainian drones deep within Moscowian airspace. Okay, Russian airspace. They came close, about an hour out of the city, and these drones are so small that they would almost have had to been launched from within Ukraine, I'm presuming. Don't quote me on that, but we'll talk a little bit more about that and why we can expect even more attacks on Moscow. According to the leaks, if you can even believe the leaks at this point, and I said I was going to go on tangents, and boy, will I go on tangents today. There's leaks that suggest that back in February, the Ukrainians wanted to do a major bombardment of Moscow, but Washington said, don't do that, because we're worried that they actually will use a nuke, according to the leaks. Now, you have to understand that these leaks that are coming out, while many may have been true, the initial batch, it's a very convenient mechanism now to deliver information which is used for the purpose of misdirection and confusing people and trying to misinform and potentially, and the Russians are aware of this, which is why I think they're taking all of these so-called leaks with a grain of salt. But if that is true, you know, I mean, there's been so many close calls, you know, whether it was the Russian fighter jet that almost shot down the British fighter jet, I believe it was, or the so-called accusations of a nuclear dirty bomb, or now this, of course, you know, like the potential of bombarding Moscow, which is why they set up all those air defense. You know, there's been so many times where they're really bringing us to the brink, and they're playing chicken, but they're playing it with everybody's life, because nobody is going to win in a nuclear conflict unless you're really quick about it and you have set up your strategic forces for that very thing, to win a nuclear war, which by some intelligence analysts' accounts is what the Russians have been preparing for years, to actually win a nuclear war. Anyways, First Republic Bank has collapsed another 50%, down another 50% today. So the Fed's backstopping and all their promises doesn't appear to be working. Is this banking thing just getting started? They kind of plug the holes temporarily, but gold is still holding strong in spite of the fact that the economy is not doing so well in the past few days. We're definitely in another bearish mini cycle, it appears. And it appears we're in, this is the recession now. The media is starting to basically say we're in a recession, so which means maybe we're coming into a depression, that depressionary part of the cycle. Anyways, already talked about the media shakedown and how that preempts war. I didn't really talk about that, though. And I do think that this is something you would see before a major escalation in the war as well. And Tucker, as much as I don't agree with him about some things, he was against the war. And, he wanted the negotiation. He was of that view that we should negotiate, not necessarily pro-Russian, of course, by Ukrainian standards. He would be construed as pro-Russian, and he was accused of that. There's a lot of people are saying that, maybe it's because he spoke out against pharmaceutical companies and the whole, that thing, that I'm not even going to get into. That may be the case, but that's already over too. So, and I think the Overton window now has relaxed to the point where advertising companies don't care, because they would rather be in front of, look, if you're a person who wants to sell something, don't tell me that these companies all of a sudden have, ethical principles that they're going to adhere to when they can advertise on Tucker Carlson, even if they don't agree with him about one thing or another. Okay, so I don't necessarily, I don't know about that whole issue. You guys write your theories in the comments section below. We'll leave it at that. Russia is likely going to deploy intermediate nuclear weapons in response to what they claim are violations of the United States in the placement of intermediate nukes. And this, of course, is just more undoing of all the various treaties. This is just another step in the escalation. If you didn't see our video, A Timeline of Nuclear Escalation, go and check that out. It'll explain everything to somebody who is just kind of new to trying to understand what is going on with this World War III stuff. You let them watch that 12-minute video. It is very inoffensive, and it's not even a sensationalist title anymore. I took some people's recommendations. I changed the title a bit just so that it's more shareable. And I really wanted to, try to condense all of the data points that I've been talking about over the past year into a bite-sized package that people can really see how far we've come in such a short period of time. Now, take that another year. Where are we in a year? If a year ago there was barely any talk of World War III, unless you were in, the farthest corners of the internet, to now everybody's talking. It's mainstream. It's a mainstream talking point. Okay, so just imagine we project that a year forward at the same rate, and it appears to be accelerating, which is the scary part. Russia's deploying its new tanks now, the Armata T-14 tanks. That could be considered a good thing or a bad thing, depending on which side of the fence you're on. It could be considered a good thing if you're Ukrainians and you think that they're running out of all the bad stuff, and now they have to deploy their best stuff. They wanted to get rid of all their bad stuff first. There's all these videos of train loads of their old Soviet era, World War II tanks, World War I tanks even, I think, in some cases. And, people are laughing at that. Or it's that now they're gaining confidence on the battlefield and they're not worried, and they're gaining air superiority. They're gaining a certain level of superiority where they're not worried about that equipment falling into the wrong hands. Because this is always the paradox of using state-of-the-art military equipment, is you're worried about it being captured and then reverse engineered. So you can never really use your best stuff, or you want to use it in a very limited fashion, unless it's all-out total war and you have no other choice. So there's two possible explanations there. They have no other choice, or they've achieved a level of dominance over their adversary, which they don't have to worry about having those things collected, which I don't think they have yet. And I'm going to talk about the reasons why, because apparently Ukraine has crossed the river, the Dnieper River, We're going to show you a map of that. They claim to have established a 20-kilometer bridgehead on the Russian side of Kherson. And that is serious because that means that they potentially now are going to go through with their plan to actually take Crimea. So understand that when this grand offensive comes together, and if they are successful and they start pushing into Crimea and they push the Russians back to Crimea, that's when your bug out bag needs to be within visual range 24/7 if you live in a major city. And I'm dead serious because that's when things could just it's not going to be the Russians just unload on the United States. No, they're going to either do a demonstrative strike somewhere on their own territory. They're going to utilize a tactical nuclear weapon in a place where Ukrainian forces are known to be concentrated as a threat. But understand also that the longer Russia delays the use of nuclear weapons, the more respect they get on the global stage. Because it shows discipline and resolve to have those types of weapons. And in the face of all these supposed losses, and I say supposed because we don't know what's going on the ground, to not use them, to have the restraint. But yes, when they do use them, ultimately it will draw some condemnation. There will be those people who simply won't care. I mean, China will say that they care, but they're not going to. When they're on the brink of going to war with Russia, as we're going to, United States, as we're talking about, they're not truly going to care. They're going to understand the reasons why. North Korea is not going to give a shit. Iran's not going to give a shit. So, yeah, that's basically when Ukraine starts penetrating that deep into Crimea, that's when we all really need to start paying hour by hour attention to this situation. Now, there was a German expulsion of diplomats from Germany, obviously, Russian diplomats, and Russia responded in kind. Maria Zakharova came out today and said, well, the reason why the United States is trying to pit Europe against each other is due with the petrodollar. I mean, she didn't really say this, but she basically said that the United States benefits by Europe fighting with each other. The next best secure currency is arguably the euro, I do believe. I think that's the next in line as reserve currency. It's not BRICS, not yet. It's not the yuan, even though it very well could be in a relatively short period of time. It doesn't take long once a country has achieved global military dominance for it to become the reserve currency. I mean, with the Americans, it happened literally overnight. It went from the British pound to, within the span of a couple years, it was, the American dollar. So it can happen, but what she's saying is that they want Europe to fight with each other so that the euro, people lose confidence in the euro, and so that they keep any money that they might have had in euros, they'll at least move it to dollars. Any value, I guess you could say, or assets that they had priced in dollars, they moved to, euros moved to dollars. So yeah, that's an important point that, there might be something to that. I'm not saying that that is what's happening, but when you're looking at this in the way that we do, you gotta speculate about that a little bit. As they talked about, the Ukrainian defense chief has said, don't worry about nukes. Russians ain't going to use them. We know everything. Just, stake the livelihoods and life of every person on this planet on our educated guess. I don't think I'm buying it. I'm going to hope that some sort of negotiation can be initiated. And it's looking like that's a possibility. That is a possibility. If you're taking the leak seriously, but I think that's only short term. And I think any sort of negotiated settlement is doomed to failure because of the past ones that weren't honored. So as I've said before, it's just going to be interpreted as the other side trying to buy time. Nobody trusts anybody anymore. There's no trust between the Russians and the Americans and NATO anymore. And there won't be until a major war is fought. It's like, you look how quickly, and Peter Schiff made this point in our interview about a month ago. He said something to the extent of, you look how fast Europe kind of got back together after World War II, and all of a sudden Germany was trading with France not too long afterwards, just a few years afterwards. Japan became an industrial powerhouse. And these things can happen fast, but only after a big explosion, because you can't have, two people can't rule one household. I went on a rant about this before. Unfortunately, you can't have a multipolar world without having a Cold War being run simultaneously. What do we got? Depleted uranium is now in Ukraine. Okay, it's now being used by the British tanks in Ukraine against the Russians. Remember, they said that this was a red line. So what we're going to see happen is you're going to see some guys in hazmat suits, Russian guys, and they're going to have their Geiger counters out, and they're going to eventually find some place with higher radioactivity. That's going to be a big news headline. And then, just like Vladimir Putin said, there's going to be reprisals and we're going to consider this a radiological act, a nuclear attack, okay? Because it's depleted uranium, supposedly radioactive, cancer-causing, that sort of thing. So it's already in use. There's already thousands of these rounds there. They use them because they're more dense and they can pack more of a punch and they can penetrate armors. So they're preferred, but of course they have those lasting effects. So that's just another point of inevitable escalation. That's, you set your watch to that one, okay, until they find some radioactive round. Are they going to be out there with Geiger counters testing every round? No. Are they going to plant one and say, look what we found? Maybe, and this is the excuse for what we're going to do next? Maybe. You just never know. According to a UK politician, world trade will be destroyed if we go to war with Taiwan. If China invades Taiwan. You don't say. You think so? That Strait of Taiwan that sees the traversing of $2.6 trillion worth of goods every year, that's going to have to go way, it's going to have to swing a huge detour, right? So here, here's Taiwan. Let's try to get this on the screen for you here. This is what could potentially happen. So you got Taiwan, you got China, you got this big, space between, there's some islands here. The United States has Guam. So ships could potentially have to go all the way around. They might even, because if there's activity in here, it's definitely going to be a no-fly zone. They're going to have to possibly go all the way around Guam. If the United States is warring with the Chinese in this region, you know how much this wild detour is going to cost? And you're going to say, well, yeah, but, that's not us. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is manufactured and the global supply chain will be turned on its head as a result of this, okay? So, that's obvious. Tell us something we don't know, Mr. Politician. It looks like we're heading east now. Okay, China's biggest peacetime military buildup. This is the biggest peacetime military buildup in history that they're seeing in China. Be happy you're a prepper right now. According to Mark Milley, they need to double their military budget if they lose the war. So you see the position we're in? It's like either we go to nuclear war or we double our military budget. What do you prefer? I guess it's a good time to invest in Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. That's not financial advice. But it appears as though we're on this collision course. I don't know how this situation is going to get resolved. I don't know if it can be resolved. I really don't know if there's I'd like to think that there's going to be somebody who sees the interest in coming to terms. And at some point, it's kind of like the prisoner's dilemma. The benefits of working together are going to outweigh the benefits of going to war with each other. Because right now, the U.S. empire is trying to maintain its hegemony. And I don't think that it matters who you put into office is going to change that. Trump is going to talk tough because every politician does that. And I'm not saying that, I would want a wild card right now, just because you almost need, not a wild card in the loose cannon sense, but you need somebody who's going to maybe have some unorthodox methods. Whether that's going to yield a better outcome is unknown. So in Sudan, there's a biolab emergency. I believe in this biolab, they test things like cholera. I'm not sure if they're doing gain of function, cholera, measles, and some other very infectious and deadly diseases. And it's been commandeered now by the rebel forces, I do believe. Now, according to Russia, they are claiming that the Americans are getting ready to wage biowarfare. That's strictly from state-sponsored Russian media, okay? Got to put that next to their check mark. But it's something to consider that this is something we have yet to see is biowarfare. I mean, you could make the argument, okay, let's not go there. But it's something we've yet to directly see. And there's some science, as far as I know anyways, that is being worked on where they can tune things to, target one ethnic group, like on a genetic level, only affect that ethnic group. Now, if viruses can mutate, and jump whole species barriers, I don't understand how nature would not find a way to ultimately spread. So maybe that's why they haven't done it yet. Anyways, there's some weird shenanigans going on with these biolabs, okay, around the world. Why are they in these? Why do you have a biolab in Sudan? Probably not the most secure place to have one. Bird flu mammal transmission is now confirmed. Okay, it's been confirmed in a lab. Ferrets are transmitting it. And you also have sea lions that are transmitting it. This is huge because if you didn't know, we are also mammals. So imagine this gets into like a primate population, like maybe somewhere in Africa, some like gorilla eats a bird one day or something, and this is all that's going to happen. Or, it picks up a dead bird on the ground, doesn't know what it is. I mean, usually animals have an intuition about that, I think, where they won't touch something. They just have that natural awareness of that. But it's going to happen where it's going to, maybe it's going to go to primates first. I mean, it's likely going to go to humans first because let's face it, there's billions more of us than there is any other primate on the planet. So if it can infiltrate those species, it can most certainly infiltrate us, and it likely will at some point in time. Maybe that's why they shook down Tucker, because they know that the next pandemic is coming, and they don't want anybody there who's too oppositional to whatever sorts of interventions that they propose. At the time, we got grain prices that may skyrocket as a result of the grain deal falling through. Now, what's happened is that the Ukrainians continue to target the Russian fleet in Sevastopol, in Crimea, and in the Black Sea. Now, this is fair game because it's a war, right? And the Russians are using those warships to shoot missiles into Ukraine. So, but the thing is that the Russians are saying, well, you're attacking us, so we are now going to suspend the grain deal, which allows for, it's an agreement that allows the safe passageway of Ukrainian ships into places like Africa with their grain. They can sell their grain through the Black Sea. If they can't do that, then they have to do it by land or whatever, and I guess it's more complicated, okay? Now, the other reason that what they're asking for and what they've been denied is to have some sanctions removed off their agricultural sector. So the Russians, in exchange for this grain deal, are getting sanctions lifted on aspects of their agricultural system, like allowing that system to access the SWIFT system to streamline financial transactions. And they've been denied that, according to the UN today. And right now, Lavrov, and this is kind of the, I don't know, I was going to say clown world aspect of this, is that Lavrov right now is in the United States directing the UN meeting. Speaking of which, because that's just part of the rules, even though the United States didn't give visas to any reporters, Israel stormed out today. They had a little bit of a fit, a little bit of a hissy fit. So they stormed out because Russia did not postpone because it's some holiday for people in Israel right now. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But because they wouldn't postpone the talks about, the Palestinians and the Israelis, they stormed out. And so this is just another sign of the divide that is happening between Israel and Russia. It's becoming more pronounced, especially considering as Iran has also just sent 300,000 artillery shells. So, you're starting to see a clear-cut Israel, U.S. versus Russia, Iran. It used to be that Russia had relations with the Israeli leader. In fact, I think last year, whoever was in power last year in Israel actually went. Did it actually go to the Kremlin last year, or did they just have a phone call? I can't remember what it was. But they were on speaking terms, but it's starting to look less so. Now, I say here, I leave this one for last, my time may be limited because Bill C-11 is coming around, and Justin Trudeau's got his YouTube channel going up now. So we're going to try to get some MPs on the channel just to talk about Bill C-11, not to talk politics. I'm not, unfortunately, I have to vote on the issues that pertain to me. That's how voting is. But I'm not sitting here saying that any side of the political spectrum is necessarily better. And I know for some of you guys, you're thinking, what the hell? Has Nate lost his mind? I'm pro-gun, I'm pro-freedom of speech and all this stuff. Well, there's still other things. Anyways, it's a difficult and contentious issue that I'm not going to get into. I'm just going to say that if they can take out Tucker, they can take out anybody. Now, my only hope is that we're not big enough. Sometimes you're too big, not too big to fail, but that's not the metaphor I'm looking for. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. And you can be too big, and you can grow too fast. And so long as I'm not in the million view range per video, I think we're probably all right to stay under the radar. Although some people, I've been told, don't agree to that. And I've been told by people in positions of influence that I'm probably on the list. And I would be naive to think otherwise. Look at that. First Republic Bank down 50%. That hurts. That hurts. Yeah, see here, check this out. U.S. dollar share of global reserve currencies. It's going down, and the euro notes arrive, right? And so there's a competition there. What is NATO for? Keeping the Russians out, the Germans down, and the Americans in. So they say. I don't know. What do I know? What do I know? This is something I wrote. If things get real, the last thing people want is to be talked to by someone in a suit. That's why the whole industry is failing as we approach the 0 hour. They just want to be talked to. Remember you had that one episode where Don Lemon was wearing a sweater and Stephen Colbert went to town on him? What are you wearing this sweater for? And that was like probably the best thing I think Don Lemon ever did in his career, was try to be relatable. Anyways, that's how she goes. But yeah, that's my bet. Don Lemon, a right-wing grifter in T-minus 2 years. Okay? Watch. Tucker Carlson, who knows? He's probably going to go on Rumble and make $1 bazillion. Unless, one last theory of Tucker Carlson, maybe he's still under contract. And, this is, a Fox News way, okay, you just resign, or we'll say we fired you. So we, keep our legal bases covered, and we'll make sure you have your platform over here. Who knows? You never know. What else we got going on here? Yes, Lavrov said at the UN Council meeting that the U.S. wishes to rip Russian economy to pieces, and it doesn't matter what administration is in power. So understand, the Russians aren't going to, as much as they try to sow division and keep the Americans fighting with one another, I don't think they genuinely believe that they're going to get any better results with Trump, because they know how the game is played. In a democracy, you have 4 years, okay? So you can't think long game in a democracy. You just can't. That's where authoritarian societies beat democracies in times of hardship and crisis, because you can plan long term. You're just trying to get elected. So at the expense of the future, you try to get reelected for 4 years, and in doing so, you never actually address the underlying problems of the system, which is why nothing changed after Trump was in the first time. U.S. may be preparing biological war against Russia, according to Dmitry Patrushev. Who knows? Who knows? Lots of speculation. But we do have this. Okay, the World Health Organization has announced that there is a high risk of biological hazard in Sudan and the North African region after armed soldiers of an unknown faction took control of a national public laboratory in Sudan that has polio, measles, and other viruses. And let's just hope Ebola isn't there. I'm pretty sure Ebola would be considered a higher level than measles and polio, but I could be wrong. They're probably on the same level of severity. Now, here's what worries me. Without giving away any details about the person who shared this information with me, I had a message from somebody, and this is, third-party info. I can't verify it at all. They said that somebody they know in an airborne unit, I'm not going to say which one, is being deployed to Sudan, and it's not for the purpose of rescue operations. It's for military operations. And you're starting to see this proxy war develop in Sudan, where the Russians wanted to build a military base there, a naval base, I believe, a couple months ago, and it was agreed to by the existing government. And all of a sudden, you got all these U.S. warships around there, and you got just plane load after plane load of people being hauled out of there. Kind of things that you would see before we are starting to see a proxy war. There's nothing the U.S. military-industrial complex loves more than a country of relatively defenseless people when you're up against American firepower, that is, who they can just have total air superiority with and call in an airstrike when they feel that they're going to get the slightest scratch. That's the society we're living in right now. There was a time when, back in the old school days, the cops would they would tackle you, they would get in fist fights with the criminals. Now you look at them in the wrong way and it's like, we're too jumpy nowadays. And I understand in some cases why they have to do that, because people are freaking crazy. Everything is extreme. We're in the age of extremes, my friends. How much time do we have? I think we're going to break a new record for our daily update in terms of the length. Yeah, this guy. I don't know about this guy. No nuclear strike will happen after Ukraine enters Crimea. We promise. Ukraine's defense intelligence chief. Usually you'd expect a little bit more salt and pepper up top, a little bit more gray hair, but doesn't. Maybe they're just running out of people to run things there. I don't know, or maybe it's just corrupt. Who knows? Stuff is going on in Moldova. I'm not going to get into the details of that. Interestingly, Zelensky is kind of telegraphing that they're going to, in some way, shape, or form, merge with Poland. He said, in the future, there will be no borders between our peoples, political, economic, and what is very important, historical. How do you have no political borders and economic borders? So, is he talking about NATO? Is he just talking about something between Poland and Ukraine? Is Poland going to leave NATO? Likely not, because they'll be destroyed by the Russians. But they're building up their military. Russia is deploying 17,000 troops along the border between Belarus and Russia. Ukraine's borders with Belarus and Russia. So potentially getting ready to invade from the north, or maybe, hold off an invasion or a counteroffensive by the Ukrainians into Belarus, which would be suicide for the Ukrainians, because now the Belarus have tactical nuclear weapons, and they likely will use them. This is what some people think Putin's dream is. So this is the part that they have already kind of taken for the most part, with the exception of this bridgehead that's been formed on this side of the river here by the Ukrainians. They've crossed over. They were being held off with artillery. And now if they're able to, kind of come in through here, and then the other plan is for the Ukrainians to come down through here into Melitopol, then cut this off, backfill all of this, and then go back this way. At least that's what the cool animated maps are. Some people think that's delusional thinking. But what they want is a demilitarized zone all the way up to Kiev. So they don't necessarily want this, but, they still want, I don't even know, how would you have a demilitarized zone that big? This just seems like wishful thinking, This would have to be Russian or Ukrainian. Maybe you guys can, it just seems like fantasy to think that they're somehow going to agree to that when they're not even willing to let Donetsk and Luhansk go. I just don't see it. Now, according to the New York Times, the counteroffensive is going to start in May. Remember the grand Russian winter offensive that we didn't see? Well, a lot of this stuff, though, is due to weather. You know, Europe didn't have winter. So, because they're seeing record temperatures year after year. Russia's newest tanks, the T-14 Armada, heading into battle. Yeah, Russians are scrambling to hide the locations of their secret bunkers. They want this stuff scrubbed off YouTube. You know, what are they preparing for? I mean, I think at this point in time, maybe they're more concerned with just the average person, or maybe lower, you know, radicals getting a hold of this information. Because clearly, if it's on YouTube, then the intelligence agencies know all about it. This is an actual Soviet era, one of probably thousands of miles of underground Russian tunnels. Russians going to deviate from the moratorium on the deployment of intermediate and shorter range missiles, which is a huge, huge escalation. I mean, we'll probably do a dedicated video about that at some point in time. These are some of the drones that fell on near Moscow. They don't look big. They look like little toy planes, but they're actually about 240 pounds, and they were carrying some ordnance, as far as I know. So, you know, eventually, I think that's a signal that eventually they're gonna do a more major campaign. This is one of the aircraft carriers that China has out to sea in between Taiwan and Guam, which is obviously a huge, huge distance. But you know, it's been in and around here. This is its pathway here. So it's been all around. Okay, so it's been maneuvering between Guam and Taiwan. And it's just going around and round. It's just patrolling, getting ready for the big offensive. According to James Cleverly, a UK politician, if China invaded Taiwan, it would destroy world trade. Yep, it will. I've already talked about that. He also said that China is carrying out the biggest military buildup in peacetime history. The UK and our allies are prepared to be open about our presence in the Indo-Pacific. I urge China to be equally open about the doctrine and intent behind its military expansion. Like, you know, the Chinese, they must just think, like, are these people dumb? Like, who do they think they're kidding? Like, I don't know. I don't know what they think. Maybe they fall. Maybe they fall for it. I highly doubt it. You'd have to be really, really dumb to fall for that. Yeah, just show us all your cards. We promise. We won't cheat you. The Kremlin denies that Putin is 70 years old and not 70 years old, that he's ill, that he has body doubles, and that he's hiding in a bunker somewhere when he gives his speeches. Russia says no to extending the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, so that's been scrapped. Big, big no-no. And I made a mistake. Actually, I made two mistakes in last week. One was a video that I showed of, it was being spread around Twitter. It was being referenced by mainstream media sources, saying that this Walmart had been looted and that this was a video that was recent, but was in fact a George Floyd, during the George Floyd protests. Now, the thing is, though, that there's all this other activity that's been going on in Chicago and everywhere, and I think this just got caught up in the flurry of all those other stories, and so people just assumed. So that was one of the mistakes we made. It's still kind of neither here nor there, because there is chaos everywhere, it seems, in a lot of places in the United States, in the urban centers, much like it is here, due to incredibly dangerous rates of drug use. But I also said that they're not having a Victory Day parade. Now, there's a clarification to be made there. They're not having as many Victory Day parades, and they're going to be drastically scaled down in terms of their size. They are going to have one, apparently, in Moscow, but it's not going to be as big and flamboyant as typically is. And yeah, Medvedev, he's got a lot of things to say today. Preventative nuclear strike, a certainty if he were president. We're probably on the verge of a world war, he says. Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons first in World War III. And he says the likelihood of nuclear weapons is growing by the day. Guys, go and pick up best damn EDC pants in the world. Let's make an army of Canadian preppers. I don't expect you to have the same thoughts and beliefs and all that stuff, but you should be carrying the best EDC gear around. And I know you American guys, you're laughing at us Canadians right now because we can't do concealed carry. But you know what I realized? I didn't realize that we could get these little mini shotties. Anyways, let's not ruin a good thing here. We're already on the list. You know, let's not get higher up the list. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.